Welcome everyone to Coffee and an Interview. I'm Jacqueline Pena, and I'm so excited to have our guest here today, Meghan DeFord, who's going to talk to us a little bit about something that applies to all of us at some point in life. We all go through professional development needs, career pivots, all kinds of things, and we're always looking for ways to be a little bit better or to enhance in some way. So we're going to dive into that conversation today. But first, let me ask Meg if she could introduce herself. Meghan, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I'm really excited to be here today. And as you mentioned, I work with individuals and specifically women who are ready to go after their goals and dreams. And it's so exciting. And when I start talking to these women and I ask them, like, what do you want to do? Tell me what you want to do. And they tell me, and I'll say, how long have you held this dream? How long has this been in your heart? And so many times it's been years and years and years. So I hope that listeners today can get a few tips and tricks and things that they can apply to their life so that when they're in a life pivot or they're just ready to take that next step on what they want to do, they have the courage to do it and some actual practical ways to do that. I am based in South Florida, but I work with people around the country, and I'm originally from the Mid-Atlantic. So I grew up in Maryland, really, really small town. I was first generation going to college, higher ed, completely changed my life. We talked about this a little bit beforehand. And I spent most of my career actually in fundraising, and most of that time fundraising for universities. And I absolutely loved it. And recently I made that transition from fundraising to full-time coaching and consulting. So it's been really fun, and I'm looking forward to it today.
That's a big transition. And you shared a couple of things. So we know you just went through a big transition yourself.
Yeah.
You talked about how so many of us have these goals and these dreams. I'm going to start there, these goals and these dreams. And when you ask, how long have you thought about this? People be like, it's been years. For me, that's true. The podcasting, the writing, right? Years and years. And these are my passions. But sometimes you don't, you disconnect from your passions because you're into the day to day with the job, the family, all the responsibilities. So it's kind of circling back and saying, man, I loved doing X, Y, Z. And I want to bring this back into my life. How long have you wanted to do this? Well, maybe 20 years, maybe 10 years. I hear people talking about a book. I've been working on a book for over 10 years. I have others that have come out, but it's this passion project that I can't seem to give birth to. So it's interesting that you're talking a little bit about that today. And I'm curious to see what are some of the things that you've spoken about with some of these folks who you're connecting with. How are you helping folks with these goals and dreams? I need some advice myself for my next pivot.
Girl, we all do. And that's something that let me start by saying this too. Like, we stand in this work with you, right? Like, when listeners are listening to this, it's not like I'm some guru that has all the answers. Like, we're all humans, we're all going through this, and we all have our special flavors of what we're dealing with, right? So what I didn't mention in my intro is that I experienced a divorce and a layoff within weeks of each other during the height of the pandemic. So that was awesome. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it was the first time in my life that I was like, oh my God, I have no plan. Like, I didn't even really know who I was. My identity was so tied to work. And all of a sudden, I'm just looking at my life, like, what am I supposed to do? And who am I? So that was a really big moment for me. And so much of my identity had been tied to my title and to the places that I worked and what I did versus who I was. And when I work with really amazing women. These are women who show up for everyone in their lives, right? Like, they are the go-to person at work, in their communities. But when it comes to their own goals, a lot of times they just don't get to it. And then they feel bad, right? They're like, either something's wrong with me, or I'm just not motivated, or whatever. And I often find when I talk to them about what are the roadblocks, I hear a lot of judgment about themselves. And when I start talking about their life circumstances and, tell me about your title, tell me about your responsibilities, so many times, especially as women, we are executing on a life that we were told we wanted versus a life that's actually fulfilling that we decided. And many times it becomes a little bit tricky because, for instance, I'm a mom. I love being a mom. I love being a mom, right? But you have to decide what that looks like for you. And so many times we don't stop and think, well, what do I want this to look like? What do I want my career to look like? And we are responsible for lots of things. We've got to make a plan that works for you because you may want to write that book, but you also have to pack lunches for tomorrow morning, right? And oftentimes we just don't take the time and we don't allow for the context. Another thing that I see a lot, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, especially in like this social media podcast, the loudest voice wins. So many women in particular, but everyone are sold that like, if you just do this one hack, or if you just optimize this one way, you'll accomplish your goal. And then you fail at it because that's not real life. Like, it sounds really good in a soundbite, but if it doesn't work for you, you're not going to do it. And so when I'm working with individuals, we look at the goal, we look at the perceived roadblocks, and we can talk about this a little bit more later. We go back to our values. What are your values? Because your values show up in your calendar. Your values show up as discipline. Your values show up as motivation. And then we go back to those goals, make sure they're aligned, and start building a plan that actually works for you. No judgment, no shame, no shoulds. We hear should a lot. We build it for you in a meaningful way for you. And within this, work, a lot of times our identity is shifting a little bit from someone who judges themselves to someone who's really empowered and making decisions based on what they want, not what is being told to them around them.
It's powerful stuff. And it's not easy. So just the
No,
first step, right?
no.
What do you really want? What is it that you care about? And sometimes we're so much in playing, fitting into this box, right? So we have the job and the lunches and all these things that we're doing, checking off boxes, and our titles. I just finished James Clear's book again, Atomic Habits, and he was talking about towards the end, don't put all your eggs into one title. A lot of times we're defined by just this title we have, whatever that title is. But you brought it back to values and understanding yourself and knowing what are the right goals for you. And I think we sometimes skip that step. We jump right into goals. I need to get this done. I need to do this. I need to do that. Are those really the right goals for you? And taking time to reflect and look at those values that are popping up in the calendar and the things that light us up, that spark that fire in us, that align to our passions. That's the first step, is figuring that out. Then looking at the goals. And then I love what you said about you look for this one thing that supposedly they say in social media, it's gonna get you to your goal, and then it doesn't work. One thing is not going to work. You need a toolkit. You need to open a big toolkit, have a bunch of tools in there for all these different things you're trying to accomplish. And I think we miss that when we keep saying this one planner, this one aspect, this one habit. One thing isn't going to change it.
Yeah. And then we feel terrible when it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, something's wrong with me. And it's like, babe, nothing's wrong with you. You've just been sold a lie. Like, and trust me, if new planners got you to your goal, I would be the queen. I have so many cute journals and planners that I've never opened because I felt like that's what was going to get me to, whatever. But it's your values. It's really interesting. And you may be able to answer this, but I will say, when I first started this work, if someone said to me, like, what are your values? I'd be like, of course I know my values. And then there would have been crickets. Like, it's something oftentimes we feel, but to actually sit down and articulate, it's difficult. And the other really interesting thing that I saw with myself, and I've seen with my clients about 80% of the time, is that they are firm in their values. We go through a values exercise and they're firm, like, yes, these are my top 3 to 5 values. And then they look at their goals and they look at their calendars and they're not living it. And when you start from that viewpoint, it allows you to make decisions so much faster. Is this aligning to what my values are? And if it isn't, you got to make a change. And I think that is really critical. And it's also really critical to look at your values. So many times, especially as women, we externalize it. Loyalty is one that comes up a lot. And people will say, like, I'm really loyal to my friends. I'm loyal to my family. I'm a loyal coworker. And I'm like, are you loyal to yourself? You know, are you kind to yourself? Do you have integrity for yourself? And when we start thinking about that, again, I think it changes our lens of how we are showing up and how we start to prioritize ourselves so that we can also prioritize others.
Yeah, I love that, prioritizing ourselves. I think that's part of the formula.
Mhm.
Many times we're thinking about everyone else and everything else, and we kind of bring ourselves down and down and down the priority list. So I love that you touched upon that. And on the values, even when you were asking about that, I had crickets in my head.
Because you feel it, right? Like you have values, but when I'm like, what are they? Like,
That is
and
a
it's
great
hard.
exercise. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
hard. It is hard to articulate. Like you have the concepts, you articulate it. But then once you do that, I totally agree. I use the term priorities a lot of times instead of values in my work. But I do agree that once you articulate your values or your priorities or things that you care about, and you
Mhm.
look at the calendar, is there alignment in how you're using your time? Is there alignment there? And I think that it's different. We have different steps we're trying to achieve. It doesn't just happen overnight. Values, alignment, goals, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly enough, it was my work in philanthropy that helped me formulate this because I was part of teams and I led teams that were really successful. And if you looked at, and, you know, raising tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And when you looked at the teams, there was no one through line between all of us. Like, we're very diverse teams, which diversity is certainly a strength. But in looking at that, it was like, what is it? Why are we, sometimes we don't even gel that well together, like, why are we being successful? And it hit me. We knew the goal. If the goal was to raise $200 million a year, okay, that's a pretty clear goal. All of us firmly believed in the mission and the vision of the organization. And so if you know that the goal is this, and here's our mission and vision or values, the way you get there, you have a lot of flexibility, but you have sort of guardrails that can help you make those decisions faster. So if we were raising $200 million a year and we had priorities of, let's say, student access, I'm not necessarily going to be raising money for a new building, like for something random. Like, it really helps you focus in on what you're doing, and it allows for people to move faster as a team, even though we're all very different people. And when I started to apply that to my work with individuals, that's when I saw the change in terms of women sticking to their goals, sticking to their plans, adjusting their plans as they go along, as they learn, versus just like, hey, let's take this 50,000 foot view, make a plan. I'll check in every now and then, right? And when we applied the values to it, that was really the differentiator for people being able to stick to their plan and achieve their goals.
Wow. Wow. And I like how you talked about the readjustment because we do have to keep adjusting as we learn and we grow and we experience here and there.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So, right, I'm as a woman, let's say I articulate my values, I see the misalignment, I create some goals, I adjust along the way. But the problem is I'm working on something, but there are other people in my life,
Sure.
right? So we have family, we have immediate family, people in our homes, we have friends, our tribe, our colleagues somewhere else. And they might not all be on the same page with my new goals and where I'm trying to go and how I'm not defining myself by one or two titles and
Mhm.
instead, thinking more holistically. How do you handle those kinds of things? And give us some advice because we're always going to have this pushback, these naysayers. Sometimes we'll have truly toxic people around us that could sabotage us. We sabotage ourselves because
Sure.
we internalize all that negative talk and then it becomes imposter syndrome. Tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about that part.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think within this work, there's a lot of grief. I'm really selling this, right? Like I'm really selling this. But there's a grief not only in letting go of the version of yourself that you've been for so long, like you have to transform. And there's parts of yourself that are going to come along, but there may be parts of yourself that like, oh, I can't do that anymore. Right. Like,
Yep.
and a really easy example of if you want to run a marathon, you can't, stay up all night. You can't continue drinking alcohol maybe as casually as you did before or whatever it is, right? And that's a bummer. Sometimes that's a bummer. But the other part of this too is the people in your life and the dynamics in the relationships sometimes change as well. And I have a really good friend who I can't talk about certain things with because it's very, like you said, like Debbie Downer. It comes from this place of like just picking out all the reasons it's not going to work. And it's coming from a place of love, but it's not serving me, right? And the relationship has had to change. So yeah, if you have people in your life like that, look to see if there's still a place in your life for them, and maybe just some of the things that you talk about or some of the things you share, you just change that a little bit. For those in our life, especially family members, where, you can't just like, there goes Aunt Lydia, right? Like you're still going to see them. It's easy enough to say like, look, it's about them. It's not about you, but it still impacts you. Right. And I think there's an opportunity to talk through it with them and to let them know how important it is, allow them the opportunity to sort of step up into that role and just say like, look, this is really important to me and I would love your support on it. It seems like you're maybe worried about me and that's sort of why you're reacting this way. But I'd really love if you could XYZ. And a lot of times people will support you. Otherwise, I think sometimes you do have to avoid those conversations or those people until the thing is done. Imposter syndrome is a real thing and it's wild. And I have to remind myself and I remind others, like, you have done it up until this very second right now. Why do you think you can't do it? Like, what is that? And if you lean into that with curiosity versus judgment, oftentimes it helps you sort of dissipate that imposter syndrome. But that voice that you're hearing, it might be your Aunt Lydia. It might be your friend. It might be your third grade math teacher who said something that's still in your head. And if you lean into it from that curiosity and you're like, wait a minute, where's this thought coming from? Is this real? Or is this just something that like is in my brain trying to protect me from failure or something like that? That can be really helpful to identify where is that voice coming from? The very physical voices you have a little bit more control over. But yeah, I mean, I think you can talk it out with people and then determine from there how you want the relationship to be.
That's very helpful. You use the word grieving, and I get why.
Yeah.
Because you have to shift things, give some things up. I'll use the marathon training, give up
Mm-hmm.
alcohol or as much alcohol. Maybe you have to shift a relationship. And if you're going to do this for yourself, I don't think there's any way around not doing that. Some of that has to get done. But you talked a little bit about fear also towards the end of what you were saying, right? We're trying to
Yeah.
protect ourselves from fear. And are some of these negative voices coming from fear, and then they hold us back? And
Mm-hmm.
this idea of fear and our goals, that was a tough one for me. I was always afraid of failure. Everything had to be perfect. You can imagine how crazy I must have been at different points in my life for thinking that way.
It's what we're taught. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what we're taught.
It has to be perfect. And so I've had a hard time learning this, but I've been learning about failing forward, failing and learning from it to do better. A scientist doesn't discover this miraculous drug that's going to cure something the first try. There are 1,000 failures along the way, and they learn from that. And thinking about what you're sharing, talk a little bit about that piece, because fear of failure can also hold us back from trying to work on these values and these goals, this alignment and the goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And fear is a real thing that, from an evolutionary standpoint, has protected us. Like, there's a reason why we go into that mode of thinking about all the different things that could happen, right? Because what if around a tree there's a lion, right? And unfortunately now, sometimes we don't send the email because of that like evolutionary thing. But there's a couple of things with this, and I'm so glad you brought it up. So, Dr. Pena, you have been very successful. You've had to be. And I think a lot of times our fear of failure is actually a lack of self-trust, because we have been taught that if we check these boxes, we're good. We've got the title. We're on the honor roll. We're doing all the things. And what happens if we make a mistake? Then we're not on the honor roll. We're not going to check these boxes. We're not going to do all these things. And that we have achieved so much, we have a fear that we're not going to be able to handle it if we make a misstep or a mistake. And if we can reframe, like you said, it's not failure. The only failure is if you stop. Leaning into curiosity and saying, okay, that didn't work. So now what do I have to do? Or why didn't it work? Or maybe this wasn't the right step. Maybe I need to take a different step. And taking that approach versus the mistake is going to ruin your life, which for a very long time, I mean, I felt like if there was a typo in an email, I was going to die. It was just like, sometimes I still feel that way, I'll be honest. But really having that trust in yourself that, again, you have survived and thrived every day of your life up until this point. If you make a mistake, you can handle it. You will learn from it. You will grow from it. But depending on how you were raised, and I will say I was raised this way, or at least this is what I took in, failure was something wrong and you did something wrong. And the older you get and the more life that you live, the only way that we grow is through our mistakes. It's through our failures. And I always laugh. I tell people this when they just can't get over something. And I'm like, when a baby starts to walk, they fall over, right? You're so excited and they fall over and you're not like, ugh, dumb baby, why can't you walk? Like you're like, oh, yeah, good job. Let's try again. You have to start talking to yourself that way. And you have to start seeing that. We're like, okay, this didn't work, but I'm really glad I tried it. What did I learn? How can I move forward? This didn't work. I don't know why. Who can I ask for help? No one I have ever asked for help from has been like, well, you're really dumb. Everybody has been so happy to help. So it's really reframing and retraining your brain to get rid of the word failure. But like when you're testing things and you're growing, sometimes that's a little bit high, sometimes that's a little bit low, and you're going to learn from both of those things. And oftentimes that gap that you need to close is going to come from the hardest moments and the moments where you are making those missteps. So applaud yourself for that, right? Like start to change that, which by the way, again, really hard. But the more you can catch yourself in those moments where if you make a misstep and instead of being like, oh, I always do this, say, hey, good job catching that. Like just start doing it slowly. And I think that actually probably goes back to your previous point with people in your life. When you start treating yourself different, people notice and they'll start treating you that way. Articulate what you're proud of. And then you'll start noticing people are noticing that and mirroring that back to you. But yeah, fear is a tough one. It's a tough one. And I think the more that you can almost befriend fear, the easier it'll get.
I love that. It's learn from your mistakes, embrace those hard times. That when we get stretched that way, that's when we really learn. I love that. More tools you've given us in the conversation today. You talked about leaning into our curiosity. I love this concept of testing versus making mistakes or failure. And instead it's trial and error, right? Like the person creating the new drug to cure something, or me trying to create a new company and trying to find the right way to provide a service or a product, right? Trial and error. You try it, see what worked, what didn't work, keep shifting, keep getting better. I love these tools that have come in. And I want to say, talking to ourselves with words of encouragement, we tend to not do that very often. We tend to be like, darn, I can't believe I did that wrong. Right. Darn, I misspelled that word in the email, right? And it's like the end of the world. It's one word. I'm that kind of person too. It's like one word. Okay, get over it. We everything's like dread, like, oh my goodness, the end of the world. What if instead I was like, okay, I caught that. I'll avoid that next time. Man, that didn't
Right.
work out, but I learned these three things. Wow, I'm so glad I tried that because now I can do this instead
Yeah.
and it's going to work out so much better. If we can start reframing and be more positive for ourselves, like you said, that attitude we're using for ourselves and that positive talk, hopefully will catch on and other people will see you in that different light and they'll start not using that negative voice as much.
Yes. Yes. And I think the other thing too about
Mhm.
reframing mistakes and reframing it as testing is when you are so used to succeeding, and especially, when you're going through higher ed and in the corporate world, a lot of that is coming from preparation. Preparation is very important. I don't want a doctor who's just going on vibes, right? Like I'm not saying that. Competency is important, but we can allow the idea of like, we just need a little bit more information. We just need one more certification. We can allow that to stop us from actually what we do need, which is the action so that we can learn. Did this work? Did this not work? And oftentimes we think clarity precedes momentum when it's momentum precedes clarity. The more that we do it, the more we're going to learn from it and the more we can expand and grow. And again, competency is super, super important. I'm not saying like don't study, don't become an expert in your field, but also don't get in the trap. And I see this all the time with women is they just need a little bit more information. They just need a little bit more inspiration. They just need, when things slow down, I hear this all the time. When things slow down, I'll be ready. And I'm like, when in your life has anything ever slowed down ever? Like, and you just have to take that first step to see what you need to do. And that can be really tricky. It can be really hard.
I like that because it happens to me as well. When things calm down, I'll start writing an hour a day. When are things truly going to calm down, right? To get that
Mm-hmm.
first fiction piece out instead of nonfiction. When
Yeah.
this happens, I can do this. When I'm able to do this, I can do that. I think we use that language a lot. And I like that you use the word momentum, right? It comes before
Mm-hmm.
clarity, right? You just have to start doing, get the bicycle going, get the pedals moving.
Right.
And imagine if I have a goal, for our listeners, you have a goal, right? You have your values, you analyze that, you looked at your misalignment with time, you created your goals. Aligning it with your time might be making sure you do the action for that goal, that momentum, get the pedals moving on the bicycle, but do it consistently.
Yes.
Carve out that time. We should be able to see it on your calendar that this is what you're trying to achieve.
Yes. And when we get to the point in our work together that, okay, we've done the values, we've said the goals out loud, we've picked our priority goal. Now let's start working backwards on the steps we have to take. We also look at what does your life look like? How much time can you actually give to this? And don't give me the answer you think I want to hear. Give me the real answer. Is it 3 hours a week? Cool. Is it 20 hours a week? Cool. Whatever it is, we can make it work. But you have to be confident in that, and you have to protect that time. And the other thing that I think is, I always applaud women by the time they get to me. It's like you've already committed to this. Like you've already taken your first step. That's awesome. Um, but part of the reason why coaching works, again, it's not like I'm some guru who has all the answers. You actually have all the answers. We're just working together. Is it's dedicated time. It's at least 1 hour a week where nothing else is happening. And there have been sessions where what that person needs is to do the work in that session. And I sit there with them and they may ask questions or whatever, but that's their dedicated time for the week. And that's fantastic. And then there's also the accountability and the support aspect of it. So it's the text message, it's the quick WhatsApp call or whatever it is of like, hey, how's it going? How did that go? How are you feeling? I have had clients who always feel like they're in trouble. And so I'll text them and be like, hey, I love you and I'm proud of you. And let me know how like your checklist went this week. You're not in trouble. No one's in trouble, right? But making sure that you have that support system as well is so important. And to your earlier point, there's going to be the naysayers, but find your cheerleaders. I call them accountability buddies. Like find those people that you can say like, hey, I've got to do 2 hours of writing my book this week. Do you want to meet me at the library? And, you have that accountability. I'm going to meet them there and I'm doing this work. So you can find that structure and those people in your life that are going to help support you so that you actually make the time for yourself and get the things done that you wanted to do.
Thank you for touching on accountability because I think
It's
we come up with the
huge.
plans. Yeah, we come
Yeah.
up with the plans, we align the calendar or how we use our time to the goals. And then we feel like we're alone and we're trying to work towards these goals. And it's not that there's a lack of motivation or nothing else is motivating us, but it's hard. It's hard when you're alone. But when you have an accountability partner, when you
Mhm.
have cheerleaders, when you're sharing stats on how the healthy habits to get to that goal, let's say it's writing a fiction book in my case.
Yeah.
How many pages have I been writing each day, or am I writing for an hour a day? And saying, look, I did it 5 out of 7 days a week, I said, and I did it this week. Having that, I think, helps us be more successful in meeting our goals. A lot of things we do alone and we feel like we're alone and
Yeah.
we want to sometimes stay alone because we don't want to deal with the naysayers and there's a saying which is keep it quiet until it's done because we don't
Yeah.
want to deal with this outside noise and the naysayers and the imposter syndrome that'll come from that.
Mhm.
But what if we pick the right tribe, the right
Correct.
cheerleaders, the right accountability partners and systems who
Yeah.
don't text us to tell us we're in trouble, but to text us and say, hey, you're not in trouble, but how's it
Yeah.
going?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And community is so important. I mean, it's so important for every aspect of our life, but finding people who can provide that accountability, who can provide that cheering on, who understand and have been where you are in some aspect or capacity is so important. And getting yourself out there and circulating and finding that community is not only great for accountability, but it starts to expand maybe how you approach things. Maybe it's, going to a library group that's like, I don't know, fiction writers or something like that. And you meet someone who's like, oh my gosh, same thing. The first time I wrote a fiction book, I thought I had to do this. And actually, this is what worked for me. Then you start to expand how you even see yourself and what you're capable of. And I don't know if you're this way, but I often think, and I don't know why this is my default, but I often think like, oh, I have to do it by myself. Otherwise, it doesn't count. And I'm like, that's insane. That's like a totally insane thing to think. So I really have to push against myself a little bit and be like, no, you need to find the right people to tell and have that accountability and be vulnerable and say, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but this is how I'm starting. There's just, I don't know if it was the way I was raised or what, but I really feel like my initial instinct on things is like, do it yourself, get it done, make it perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. And then show people. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. It's not how any of this
We grew
works.
up together. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's difficult like to push yourself that way, but I promise you won't die. I felt like I mentioned to you, I'm in South Florida, and I recently found this group called the Boca Creative Club. Shout out to them. They're awesome. And they have a co-working every Friday morning. I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Just go to the coffee shop. And I am 43 years old. I walked into that coffee shop. I felt like I was 9. I was like, what if they don't like me? What if I'm too old? What if I'm like not cool enough to be here? It's been wonderful. No one made fun of me. I survived. And now there's this group of people that like, great to see you. What are you working on? Oh, what are you working on? Like bouncing ideas off of them. Sometimes I just have my headphones in and work, but just being in that, company of other people is so helpful. So push yourself a little bit. It'll be worth it.
Oh, I love that concept of the co-working space. Your
Mhm.
questions and your fears are the same ones I would have. Am I too old? Am I going to fit in? Are they going to like me?
Yeah.
Is this going to work? What am I thinking? Maybe I shouldn't go today. That would be me.
Yeah.
But we work through that fear to
Yeah.
see what comes, the positive things that come out of it on the other side. So that I
Yeah.
think that's important. You talked a lot about all these great tools for our toolkit. So thank you
Mhm.
for that. And I'm taking a lot of tools back myself. And I want to also touch upon something that you've kind of said in a couple of places as we're
Sure.
working on our goals and we're working on different habits to meet those goals and we're pushing ourselves through the hard parts. That's where the stretching happens and the growing happens. You're seeing an identity shift as well. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel that we're not going to be the same person at the end of this work, and this work will just keep growing over the years.
The identity work is almost the most important part, right? And sometimes it can be difficult, sometimes it can be super exciting. And I think the hardest part is most of us don't stop, just like our values, most of us don't stop to think about it. Right. Like I am Meghan DeFord. I'm a mom. I'm a leader in my field, da, 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 whatever. Right. Like whatever it is. And we don't stop and think about like, well, wait, is that who I want to be? Is that like, do I just press play and say the bio and like actually live that life? So taking that time, it can be sometimes fun to think about all the possibilities. And sometimes it can be a little tough when you're like, wow, my life doesn't align to who I thought I was. And what I like to do, I'm big on visualization, and I like people to think about their future selves. What does your future self have? Maybe it's in 5 years. My future self is living in Spain on a vineyard, and I'm doing like architectural tours for women or something. I don't know. That sounds great to me. But okay, so I have that in 5 years. How did I get there? What does life look like? Would future Megan make this decision right now? Probably not. Okay, what would future Megan do? And that has really helped me a lot, that visualization. But it's being open to that growth and that change, and also being open to sometimes it's a little painful when you're like, I really haven't been living who I thought I was, or I don't actually really know who I am because I just show up for everyone else. And I think oftentimes women in particular have been conditioned to be needed versus fulfilled. And when we are needed and giving to others and externalizing, that's how we're getting our worth. We're producing, and other people are benefiting from us. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like there's nothing wrong to giving. But there is a problem when you don't stop and think about, is this fulfilling to me? Is this what I want? And a lot of that identity work comes into that as well. And it doesn't mean you have to have some huge major shifts in your life. Like you don't have to blow everything up. I actually recommend you don't blow everything up in your life. But sometimes it's returning back to something you wanted to do as a kid. So like you talking about writing, I loved writing as a kid. When I was a kid, guess what my like dream job was?
Reporter, writer, journalist.
Yes. So a writer for either Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, or National Geographic, or all three. And I just loved writing. And I was an English major in college. But then it got like really technical and academic. And I loved my degree. Shout out to the humanities, love the humanities. And then I got into this role where you were in front of CEOs and you're presenting to the board, and you have to be just show up in a different way and present in a different way and perform in a different way. And so when I was going through this and I was like, do I want to stay in fundraising? Like, I like it, but I've changed, and it's just not fitting anymore. I was like, you can be a writer. And writing for me now is a newsletter, and I'm working on a book, and I've done a journal, and like returning back to that joy that I found. I don't need to win, an award for it, but I need to nourish myself in it. So if you want to, back to the identity part, if you want to be a writer, be a writer, be a writer. If you want to be an athlete, be an athlete. Like, don't count yourself out of these things. But you get to define what it is, and you get to understand how it's shaping your identity and how it fits into your life. I think it's so funny. I'm a runner. I help run a women's running group, and I grew up a multi-sport athlete on team sports, and running was always a punishment. Jacqueline, it took me almost 6 years of running 5 days a week to call myself a runner. I was like, well, I don't know. I'm like, oh my God, girl, you're a runner. Like, and I started I was like, what is going on with that? And I was like, because you thought being an athlete was being on a, team sport, or, you had this really limited definition of what an athlete is. You're still an athlete. It just looks different now. So, I like rambled a little bit, but like taking time to step back, who do you want to be? And don't count yourself out of it. You can be, and I'm very woman focused. So you can be a mom who's involved in the community and have a job outside of the home. And you can be a DJ. Like, you can do whatever you want, but you have to take the time to stop and think, who am I? Who do I want to be? And how does this serve where I'm going and who I want to grow and evolve into? Again, I don't know if this resonates with you at all, but there was something about change means you've done something wrong. And like, I know my mom was always like, you get a job and you're in it for 25 years and then you retire. And somehow I just like took that in, and I was like, why do I think that? When I see people who have done lots of things in their life, I'm like, that's so cool. So why are you judging yourself for wanting to do other things? Evolution is normal, change is normal, and you get to decide what that looks like and when that change happens for yourself.
Wow. We just came full circle. I
Yeah.
just want to point that out in a beautiful way. And asking, who do you want to be?
Yeah.
Right? Who do you want to be? And reflecting on that brings us back to the beginning of the conversation, where it has to start with that reflection to know, what are your passions and your values? What are your values? That's part of who you want to be. And being able to think about who you want to be and then make those decisions based on that, those shifts based on that. It's a beautiful way to think about it. The hard part, the first, biggest, most difficult part will be figuring out who that is.
Yeah.
Right? Because we have to unwrite a lot of narrative inside of ourselves.
Yeah.
But once we do that reflective work and we decide who we want to be, we have our values, we have our alignment, we come up with our goals, we have our habits to meet those goals, we have our accountability partners. We're doing these mind shifts, we have these boundaries set up from those naysayers, negative people. We're leaning into curiosity instead of leaning into the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean, what a wonderful full toolkit we're leaving this conversation with today,
Yeah.
looking at it from that perspective. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think that the really great thing about this that you articulated so well is that it grows with you. As you change, the process itself you can take with you. And I love the tools in your toolkit. I always think about Dora with like her little map and tool, whatever, exactly. And that stays with you and allows you to grow. And you'll add more tools to your toolkit. And as it relates to identity, you don't have to know right away. Lean into the exploration of it and know that it's going to change. So that's part of the joy, is the growth in all of this. Have fun with it. Have some joyfulness with it. Have that curiosity versus that fear, right? And sort of all the things that could go wrong, or what are people going to think of me? And the other secret, as the older I get, is like, no one cares. Everybody's worried about their own thing. Do your do your stuff. Like, no one actually cares. Do your thing. Be kind. Don't harm other people, and just live your life fully. Really, I mean, just eat it up.
I agree. So thank you for those closing
Yeah,
words.
thank
Is there
you.
anything else you want to share with us that we haven't talked about yet? Or tell us a little bit about how we can find you and find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked about a lot. Thank you so much. And this has been such a fun conversation. And people can find me on pretty much every social media. The handle is at Meg DeFord. So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Threads. And then my website, super easy, Meg DeFord, DEFORD.com. And if you want to chat, there's a way for you to schedule some time to chat with me. But this has been such a fun conversation, and I can't wait to read your book when it comes out.
Ooh, my accountability partners here.
Yes, I'm here.
Well, thank you so much. And for our listeners, these resources, these links are in the description. Megan, it has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for bringing all these tools for Toolkit to the table with so many rich examples. And I'm sure whoever listens to this episode will get something out of this because this is valuable advice for life.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity.